Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if it's your first time coming across one of my videos. And I am the Mature Exotical Lady, and this is episode 2 of Autism in Women. And just before I go on to talk about the differences that has been sort of highlighted in terms of research between how the symptoms appear to manifest in women compared to men, I just want to go back a bit and sort of talk a bit more about some of the behaviour symptoms and communication symptoms that I should have said a bit more about in terms of myself, really, because it was only something that sort of occurred to me after that. I missed a few points. So when I spoke about the issue of rocking, for example, which was a form of stimming for me, and also when I spoke about, I think it was when I was speaking about comforting behaviors, and I said I would rock, and I would have a pillow, and I would also have like a t-shirt, and I would have like a pillow that one of them, the pillowcase, it couldn't be washed. I needed the smell. There was like a familiar smell that would build up in it. And also the more I sort of used the t-shirt and the pillow as a feeler, the softer it would become. And it would just be like so comforting. There was something else I missed. I used to suck my thumb, sometimes at the same time as sort of feeling the pillow and smelling the pillow and sort of running the t-shirt through my fingers. But also at other times as well, I would literally suck my thumb, my left thumb. For years I would do this. And yeah, that was something I didn't mention, the sucking of the thumb. And it wasn't just because I know, sometimes children do suck their thumb, but mine was a combination of sucking the thumb and feeling the t-shirt and smelling the t-shirt or the pillow all at the same time. So it would almost be like it wouldn't be the same if I was sucking my thumb and I didn't have the t-shirt, or vice versa, or the pillow. If I didn't have that sort of soft material that I could keep feeling and pressing down on at the same time I was sucking my thumb, it just wouldn't be the same. So I had to do the two to get to the two together. So that was something I needed to mention in terms of repetitive behaviours and sensitivities and so forth. Yeah. And another issue I needed to mention as well around my working life. When I thought about this in more detail, because I think I had said that I didn't find that I had been affected in terms of my career, but actually I had been affected, but not in a way whereby I had experienced problems during the work itself. Well, not any problems that wouldn't be no different from anybody else in the norm of a sort of job when you're young, because I'm talking about when I was quite young now. But certainly in terms of preparing for work and sort of how I felt when I was at work, and I found it very difficult. I remember when I was really young, sort of, because I started working really young because I had my children young, I would sort of do quite menial jobs then, as you do. I remember working in a sandwich factory. I remember doing chambermaid work in hotels. I remember cleaning. I remember doing sort of like working a cafe for a period. And I did these sorts of jobs before I then sort of went on to do sort of jobs that were a bit more sort of bougie, if I could put it that way. So I went to work in retail eventually, and I worked in some sort of more higher end sort of brand shops. But what I would find in them early jobs is that it's almost like I would get to a point where I just couldn't go back in anymore. The anxiety of doing the job would sort of build up, and I would actually leave after maybe 2 or 3 months. I remember sort of going through jobs like that in my early time, and I don't know how common that was for other young people. And bearing in mind, I was a young mum, because I had my first son when I was sort of just before my 17th birthday. So we are talking about me sort of doing this work, doing these jobs within the context of trying to be a young mother as well. but yeah, I remember that. And also I remember that what else would I remember? It's gone in my head. There was something else I needed to mention around this. I should have made a note, but there was something else I needed to mention. So that was around the employment. The self-harming behaviours, that was it. I wanted to sort of briefly touch on that as well, again, because I did self-harm, but not in a sense where you might think about self-harm, which most people think about self-harm, they're thinking about your maybe cutting yourself, or forms of self-harm that are very obvious and you're actually physically doing it to yourself in a physical sense. The way I would say that it's sort of self-harmed was exposing myself to high risk situations. I would, throughout my life, expose myself to people who clearly weren't healthy for me, whether that would be in friendships or relationships, and it would result in harm. It would result in emotional harm, psychological harm, financial harm, physical harm on some occasions. And the thing is, intellectually, I would know that these situations aren't right, but somehow I would be unable to prevent myself until a particular cycle I'd gone through a particular cycle, to then sort of come to the conclusion that no, this is not good. This is harmful to you. So I think that's important, because I do think it's important to recognise that we can put ourselves in situations where we are harmed, and to the extent that we fail to sort of protect ourselves, and we know we're putting ourselves in a situation that is harmful, that is a form of self-harm. So I think that is really important to make that point around that. Yeah. So having said that, I should sort of now go back to what we were going to talk about, which was really what the differences are, what sort of differences have been identified between sort of male and females when it comes to symptoms and how they differ. So one of the things, I mean, there was a study that was carried out, actually. It was quite a large study in 2020, and it says that in that study, it says that actually they found that when they looked at behaviours between autistic males and females, it was reported that autistic females were reported to have more externalising behaviours. But then on the other hand, another study found that actually autistic males had greater externalising behaviours, okay? Now, what they've said is that from the sort of observations they've made, they say that typically females tend to present more internalized symptoms, okay, when it comes to higher functioning autism. And just to sort of remind everybody that I am specifically talking about high functioning autism here, or what used to be termed as Asperger's. We're not talking about, sort of the more severe forms of autism that are completely different when we're talking about symptoms. What I'm talking about here is mood issues. So when we're talking about internalized symptoms, we're talking about problems with moods, anxiety and depression are the sorts of symptoms that they have identified can be very different for females than to males. But when I looked at this issue of externalizing symptoms, and where they said that females' symptoms tended to be more sort of external, they are different again. When we're talking about the types of externalized symptoms that a male and a female would exhibit, they are different again. And the female externalizing behaviors tends to be more around dysfunctional behaviors in the wider sort of social community, so drug use, finding it difficult to sort of moderate their own behaviors, so like staying out and putting yourself in risky situations, hypersexualized behavior, or any sort of sexualized behavior, literally, has been observed more in young females who are showing symptoms of having higher functioning autism, because they're not aware, or at that age they're certainly not aware of how they put themselves at risk from, you know, potential abusers in the wider environment. So when we're talking about externalizing behaviors, which contrasts with the sorts of externalizing behaviors that they found in males, whose behaviors tend to be more sort of socially awkward externalizing behaviors, yeah. So they might isolate themselves more. So, whereas the female externalizing behavior, she may overcompensate in social situations with sort of hyper, how could we put it? What's the word I'm looking for now? What is that word in my brain? It's the menopause, folks, my brain fog. Extrovert, that's the word I'm looking for. So whereas the female, the young lady, the young woman, the teenage girl, to use all these different descriptions of our females, she may overcompensate with a sort of extrovert character, trying to present as more extroverted in personality in order to fit in. Whereas the male may be more socially isolated, so the opposite, introvert, may purposely appear more introverted in order to avoid, for people to sort of avoid any expectations of social engagement, literally, So I just sort of wanted to sort of give you an example of how the externalization can appear different, even though both are externalized behaviors, So with women, young girls acting out more, because we're expected to be more social. I think that's what it is. I think as young women, when we're sort of, women are just in more general expected to be more social, I suppose. We're meant to be nurturers. We're expected to be sort of hosts, aren't we? To have these skills. And often this is a problem for young females who are on the spectrum, high functioning spectrum, who have to try to cope in those situations, meet the stereotypes, literally. So, and this goes into the theme of what we call masking. And masking is behaviours that are used by both male and females to compensate for the awareness that they lack the skills naturally to be able to sort of like fit in more socially to the various range of situations that they're expected to function within. So what the researchers says here is that they believe that adult females and girls are more likely to mask their symptoms. And this, they say, is particularly common among females at the lower support need end of the ASD spectrum. So that is someone like me who I consider myself to be higher functioning autistic, and I would wholeheartedly agree with that. So some of the masking behaviours that they say that the young females have exhibited does include forcing yourself to make eye contact during conversations. So again, it's almost like intellectualizing. You're intellectualizing this whole, you're pre-thinking your social skills in that, literally, you're sort of aware of your own performance in that situation, in that conversation, and I know that feeling well. Sort of being extrovert in a sense that as well, that you don't always know, you're not aware, you don't have the emotional intelligence to understand that, okay, it might not be appropriate to make this comment, or not all opinions should be given. Sometimes, you need to know that, oh, she looks like this, or he looks like this, but you shouldn't say it, sort of thing. With me, it was more about sometimes being in a situation and expressing opinions that really I didn't need to express. But because I would feel the need, I need to say something, you know. And you can be quite literal in these situations, and when you're looking at someone, because they say, oh, you should make eye contact. And again, that's very cultural specific anyway. But if someone says, oh, you should make eye contact, so you'd be literally making eye contact to the point where it could become quite rude, because people could think you're actually staring at them when you're not. It could feel too intense, you know. And your speech, the sort of speed at which you're speaking, all that's affected as well. It could be out of sync almost. It could be like you are memorized. You could have written a script for yourself, literally. And I think it does actually mention that, because, yeah, it says preparing jokes or phrases ahead of time to use in conversation. I mean, I've not done that, obviously, and to a certain extent, not for social events anyway. But obviously, in my work, I have to prepare in advance. You need to prepare what you're saying. And I need to do that very well. I do need to prepare very well in terms of when I know that I'm going into a hearing as a lawyer, and I've got to make, say, quite a long submission to the judge. I mean, you should always prepare anyway, so that is not so unusual. But normally, you should prepare off summarized notes. But with me, there are occasions when I literally have to write out word for word what I'm going to say, just so that if I become overwhelmed, I have that script that I could stick to literally word to word. If I go blank, with out of anxiety, because you can become so overwhelmed that you could just go blank, literally. So to avoid that happening, that I have a tendency to over prepare, and I know that. I do know that very well. And it goes on to say, mimicking the social behaviours of others. Now, this is something I've definitely done. But I should add, this is quite contextual for me, outside of potentially being, as I said, high functioning autistic. Being a biracial black woman of the generation that I am, and I am Generation X, born in the late 1960s, okay, there weren't many biracial people around in the community where I live in, black biracial, and there certainly weren't many black biracial girls like me. And obviously my mother was white. So, and I didn't have access to other adult black biracial women. That wasn't something I had access to when I was very young. So, mimicking was a part of my identity development as well, to do with my biracial heritage, and also to do with the fact that my mum had mental disorder and she could not interact with me on an emotional, social level at all. My mum's engagement with me was purely on a practical, physical level, and that was literally to sort of like prepare food, to the extent that she was able to do so, and actually just to be physically present in the same room as me and my sister when we were growing up, So I couldn't learn from my mother about sort of how to develop as a young girl, mirror and role model my mum. I had very limited opportunities for that. Very limited opportunity, no opportunity at all, literally, to be honest with you, So I am very conscious that a lot of my mimicking behaviour stems from those other two factors, and not just because of my literal, what I believe was high functioning autistic behaviour. Yeah. And again, that would also extend to the other point, which is about imitating expressions and gestures. This is certainly something I was very conscious I started doing when I was in my teenage years. you know. And when I was in my teenagers, early teenagers, because I sort of went to a school that was a bit further afield, I had much more access to other black biracial and mixed race people, and especially females, who were around my age and a bit older. And I found that, so I found that I was mimicking them in terms of their style, how they would speak, you know, the sorts of things they were interested in, how to do my hair. Yeah, definitely. And also, obviously, as you do with celebrities. I remember at the time I was into Sister Sledge, I was into Diana Ross, you know, and they had the sort of, you know, Diana Ross with her long flowy hair. I mean, I don't know if it was hers or not, but it seemed to me to be, and Sister Sledge, I don't, for those of you who are my generation, you might remember Sister Sledge. They were the soul sisters that used to sing, "We are family. Eh, 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 eh. I got all my sisters in me." Yeah, I love Sister Sledge. I had all their albums, four sisters, and they all looked mixed, you know, and they had nice long hair. And I was looking for, you can see from my pictures the sort of hair that I've got. I would say for those of my viewers who may be from a mixed biracial black background or black women, that my hair type is sort of maybe 3B. You know, it's different now. The pictures you're seeing in the video are pictures that have been taken since I'm 40 upwards. And when I was much younger, my hair was thicker and I would say more coarser. I started relaxing my hair when I was about 17. After I had my first child, I started relaxing my hair. And I literally had my hair relaxed my whole life until when I became unwell in 2020 and my hair fell out. And so what happened is I just didn't, you know, I wanted to regrow it back and just have my natural hair without any chemicals, without any relaxing chemicals in it. And for those of you who don't know, relaxing chemicals are chemicals that black women and mixed black women use to straighten their hair. They use those to straighten their hair, yeah, basically. So yeah, so I was like doing that, and now today, sorry, sounds like I raised my voice. I am like a kid in a candy shop. As big as I am, I'm like a kid in a candy shop because now with social media, I have so much access to all these beautiful biracial and mixed race black women. And oh my gosh, I am here for it. I am here for it. The way how these women put themselves together was what I wanted when I was younger, you know, and I didn't really, as I say, I didn't have access to that, you know. But then now with social media and, you know, the whole world sort of being on social media, the way that black biracial and mixed race black women do their hair, the way they style themselves, their makeup to sort of like on all the different sort of colours that we are, you know, from darker skinned to beige and quite light beige skin tones. I love it. I get so many ideas. I do Pinterest. I have got Pinterest, you know, of all different types of women, white, black, but my black, biracial and mixed black women, oh, it's heaven for me because that's what I wanted when I was younger. I was always looking for women that looked like me with my phenotype, who I could learn to sort of develop a sense of style from, you know. And I eventually figured it out. I kind of figured out I'm kind of like a bohemian type person, but then I can be very sort of formal. And I learnt to colour coordinate and I learnt all these things over time, but it wasn't easy. And I used to literally rely on shops to put together the mannequins really well, you know. And the problem with the mannequins was that they didn't really have my shape though. You know, they were sort of quite straight up and down. And I am very much sort of hourglass, I would say. I'm a small chested hourglass, you know. I haven't really got much of a chest, but I've got the shoulders and I've got the hips and I've got small waistline. Like I say, I love it, and to this day, I always look for inspiration from the younger ones when it comes to styling myself. And also, I've come across this lovely lady actually on YouTube. Her name is Deborah Berry, and she looks like a mixed black woman. She's in her early 70s, but she is phenomenal. I mean, she dresses so lovely, and so check her out if there are anyone here who's interested in seeing how a more mature, senior, mixed raced woman, black woman, would look and dress in her sort of senior years. I think she's about 71, 72, but she's tall, she's elegant, she's lovely. Give a shout out to Deborah Berry, and I'm going to probably put her handle in the descriptions at some point if it's not there already. Okay, guys. So that's that. So those are the sorts of behaviours that has been noted as how women in particular mask the inadequacies that they feel in order to fit in as young women growing up, yeah, when they're on the spectrum, and they find it really difficult to cope with executive functioning skills, which are your ability to organize yourself and your environment essentially. So that does affect your grooming, how you put yourself together, being able to sort of understand appropriateness of how you dress in different seasons, whether something's comfortable, because it can affect you in that way. I mean, you can be affected by the sorts of material that you put against your skin. That is something I've mentioned in the first episode. It certainly affected me. Certain material I just couldn't be around, particularly around bedding. But shoes as well, knowing when, because I went through periods where I would wear really uncomfortable shoes, because even though they were uncomfortable, I thought I needed to wear them. They're the right thing for me to wear for this particular occasion. I wouldn't really think about and consider whether they're comfortable, I just thought, well, these are the shoes that you wear in this situation, i.e. you wear a black pair of shoes if you're going to an office and it's a formal. I'm just giving you an example. I would literally think like that. I would literally be literal. Literally be literal. But you know what I mean? And the consequences are that you've not really organised yourself to be comfortable and prepared, So because of these behaviours, what the research finds is, because when you're higher functioning as a young woman, it's harder for people to pick up that there's actually something wrong with you, And so they say this is one of the reasons why they believe women tend to be diagnosed not as early as young men, young boys, teenage boys, because of these sorts of masking behaviours. So when they look at, well, what causes autism in females, and what they're saying is experts aren't sure what causes ASD, period, okay? And given the wide range of symptoms and severity, it's likely caused by several factors, including genetics and environmental factors. And again, I would wholeheartedly agree with certainly including genetics, because as I've said in my first, not even just in the, I think I did mention it in the first episode of this series when I was sort of introducing the subject, but I've mentioned this also in another video when I spoke about growing up in an unconventional family. I do believe that my own mother was misdiagnosed with mental disorders, i.e. undifferentiated schizophrenia, when actually what my mother did have was learning disabilities, and she had moderate autism, is what I do believe. I strongly believe that. So having said that, it says that while there's no evidence that the exact cause is different between the sexes, some experts suggest that males have a higher chance of developing ASD. For example, investigators believe that girls might be born with genetic protective factors that reduce their risk of ASD. Male brains are exposed to higher levels of male hormones in the uterus, which can affect brain development and may be a factor in ASD development. This is called the extreme male brain theory. As a result, a child might focus more on understanding and categorizing objects, traits that are generally associated with the male brain. This is in contrast to emphasizing and socializing, which are more often associated with the female brain. That's interesting. But again, it would sort of explain the the symptomology and why there is some divergence in how symptomology is expressed. When I say symptomology, folks, I mean symptoms. So while this is still only a theory, in other words, more research is required on this, it does seem to support the hypothesis, though not conclusively. The effect of hormones on brain development isn't well known yet, giving this theory some limitations. So there we are for today on this, and obviously we will talk more about this. And I think we'll talk about what they say, how you test for autism in females. I think I should do that as episode 3. So that way, anybody who comes to this video and you think you might be affected by this, you can have some idea as to what you can expect to do, really, or what sort of tests you may find yourself taking in order to find out if you might be on the spectrum. So thank you very much for watching this video, and please give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down and subscribe, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye bye.